Up next, let's talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves. They were 6-6 this season. They were 10-10. They were 17-17, and right now they're 21-19. But over this recent stretch, they've had losses to the Warriors, the Grizzlies, the Celtics, and the Thunder. And their upcoming schedule has more tough games as well. They face the Knicks, Cavs, Grizzlies, Mavericks, Nuggets, Hawks, and Suns. Woo! So Minnesota, they've beaten bad teams. They've lost to some competitive teams, and they have a lot of those coming up. And then you have Anthony Edwards after their loss to the Warriors on Wednesday. He comes out and says, the starting five, we are terrible. Every game we come out low energy, and the second group comes in and gives us energy. I would say the starting group got to come out with more energy, like we want to play the game of basketball, like we love the game. Tom, is it time to panic about the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Yes. Smash that panic button.
Ooh.
If you look at the body language of Julius Randle, who's like MVP of body language talk, right? This guy is always into body language talk, doesn't have the great energy, even with the Knicks, that you want out of your star player or a guy who's been all NBA star player. At the end of that game against the Warriors, who was the only player on the Minnesota bench that was sitting during the last 5 minutes of the game? It's Julius Randle. I'm not talking about that he went to the bench and he wasn't playing on the floor. I'm talking about every other player on that Timberwolves team was standing up. Mike Conley was practically on the floor the entire, crunch time against the Warriors. And there
with a comeback, because they had a comeback. There was good energy. They're coming back in the game. Exactly.
Great energy. And he's sitting there doing this whole thing, like looking around his teammates who are standing, because he couldn't see the game because he was sitting there with the towel over his shoulder and sulking. This guy, he was benched like 5 minutes left in that fourth quarter. They rallied back. Naz Reid had some amazing plays. He had a big mistake in losing Stephen Curry down the stretch. If Julius Randle did that,
Tom,
dude, if Julius Randle did that, we wouldn't hear the end of it. But Naz Reid gets the switch.
Tom, that made me so sad. It ruined so many of the good moments Nas had. He just had a big brain fart. How does he forget Stephen Curry?
Just like gets a switch, right? And they're like, the Warriors are like, this is exactly what we want. We want a big having to trail Steph Curry around the court. Oh, wait, he's gone. And he hits it. Right before, that was the big highlight, right? Was the viral moment of Steph Curry talking to the fan in the stands. It was because Nas just lost him. Just totally forgot. Oh, yeah. That's my guy. And you saw Ant just go, come on. You lost him. But look, I think it's over. I think the Julius Randle era in Minnesota is just about over. When you look at the last play of the game, they had to bring back the guys onto the floor because it was, there was still a little bit time left. But who had already left by then? Julius Randle. He was the first guy to leave, and he was already out of the arena by the time the game had ended. He left before the play had stopped. So you look at this. Julius Randle has been on the bench for clutch time 2 out of the last 6 times they've had clutch games. He's played only 40% of the Minnesota Timberwolves clutch minutes since December 31st. They've already made the signals. You've already heard Ant Edwards talk about how we need more energy. We're getting killed in the starting lineup. I think it's over. I think Julius Randle, if it doesn't happen in the next game, Chris Finch is already thinking about making a starting lineup switch and moving Naz Reid into the starting lineup in place of Julius Randle. Something, KOC, we've been talking about all season long, as I don't know how the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to last as a title contender with Julius Randle starting over Naz Reid. And it seems like Finchie is looking at this situation by playing Naz Reid the last 17 minutes of that game and saying, you know what? He might be our guy instead of Julius Randle.
I mean, look, Finch is, he's throwing darts, trying to figure this out, and gotta credit him. He puts DiVincenzo in the starting lineup over Conley as of late. Conley, like, all due respect, he's had an awesome career, but he's 37 years old. He looks done. He can't get into the paint anymore. He just can't create for others in the same way that he has before. 36% from 3 is not horrible, but it's below average. And with his other limitations on the floor, he needs to be way above 40%. So DiVincenzo coming along, that's a good thing for them. Yep. And you said it. They need to replace Randle in that starting 5. They have to. And I thought the stat you shared about 40% of his minutes in clutch time, the time he does play in the clutch against that Memphis team over the weekend, under a minute left, ISO against Jaren Jackson Jr. and Julius Randle with the dubious handles, to quote Walt Frazier. What are you doing? Going at Jaren Jackson Jr. with those dubious handles. Oh my God. Like, if I'm a Timberwolves fan, I'm screaming at the TV because it happens time and time again with him where he just gets this blinders on and he doesn't see anybody else out there. It's just him and the ball and the rim. He doesn't even see the defender in front of him sometimes. That's Jaren Jackson Jr. Make a play for your teammates. And that's why it's moments like that. That's why Chris Finch is opting for others in those late game situations over Randle. And it's the right choice. Randle might be starting these games, but he's not finishing a lot of these games.
And that's how you know. That's how you know. Like,
exactly.
It's coaches have always told me, like, it's not about who you start, it's about who you finish. And I think you've seen time and time again as of late, over the last few weeks, Finch is deciding Julius is not my guy.
Yes, and they need to move him. They have to find a way to move him. Have to.
And that's the problem here is, like, how do you move him? You know, it's the same Jimmy Butler situation in a sense where it's like his trade value right now is an all-time low. He's going into a free agency year. And if you're Julius Randle and you're acquiring that guy, he's going to want to make his money back, right? He's going to want to get into a situation where he has an ability to show that, look, I'm the guy. I can be that guy for your team. But how many teams are looking to add that energy that Finch is already decided, like, I'm going Naz Reid? And look,
awful.
I am smacking the panic button here, but they do have a great option in Naz Reid. Like, he's awesome to replace Julius Randle. The writing's on the wall. Question is, who's going to take on Julius Randle? And what's interesting to me is that trade, Dante DiVincenzo, Julius Randle, and the Detroit first-round pick coming from the Knicks for Cat. That Detroit first-round pick, lottery protected, kind of looks pretty good right now, doesn't it? Because the Detroit Pistons are going to be, in the playoffs if Cade Cunningham and the supporting cast continue to play this way. That's going to be a first-round pick that Minnesota can trade this offseason if they want to move Julius Randle somewhere and entice another team to take on that energy of Julius Randle. What about the Raptors? Bruce Bowen, Chris Boucher, those salaries match. Maybe you toss in that Detroit pick and just to entice Toronto to make that move. I don't know, but that seems like Toronto with the veterans on their team. That's one team I would be calling and saying, like, look, you take in Julius Randle. I know he's not going to be part of your long-term plans, but we'll kind of give you a sweetener here. And I don't know if the Minnesota Timberwolves would do that deal, but I do like those pieces better than what Julius Randle's bringing them.
I'm intrigued. Bruce Brown would be really a nice fit. He's the anti-Julius Randle.
Did I say Bruce Bowen? Did I say Bruce Bowen like Spurs? Spurs Bruce Bowen? Do you think he would be better right now for the Timberwolves?
Bruce Bowen at what, age 50? How old is Bruce Bowen right now? Bruce Bowen.
That's what it's come to,
53
KOC.
years old.
That's what it's come to.
Come on down, Bruce Bowen. Yeah. But yeah, I think Bruce Brown, that's a good target for Minnesota. But with Randle, I think you're right. There's an element of he has a player option for next season. He probably wants long-term stability. I got to get mine. But it's not just Randle in this situation. Like, even if you were to, say, flip him for Bruce Brown and get this gritty, hard-nosed defensive player, switchable, versatile, selfless, cutter, mover without the ball, even if you add that guy to the team, like, there's still concerns with Minnesota. There's still, like, Anthony Edwards is in a situation this year. He's talked about, and I think it's fair to criticize him for complaining about how much he gets double teamed. I don't want to play this style. I don't want to get doubled all the time. But to his credit, of the nearly 300 players to run 25 pick and rolls this season, so that's not a lot of pick and rolls, 25 pick and rolls this year. Of the nearly 300 guys to do that, Anthony Edwards ranks number one in the amount of times he's been blitzed. So that means teams have sent two at him 16% of the time in pick and roll. That's a stat provided me from Sports Radar. So that's number one in the NBA. In the pick and roll, Anthony Edwards is getting blitzed. Teams trying to take the ball out of his hands. You're a playmaker, not a scorer. That's what they're trying to turn him into. He has not been efficient in isolations this year. Of the top guys in the NBA with the most isolations, the two least efficient players are Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards. There's just a
I
lack
think that's
of
related.
spacing.
I think that's related, by the way.
Yes.
I think why are they blitzing Anthony Edwards so much is because teams want Julius Randle to go ISO.
And I think trading Randle helps, but I am also, just smacking that panic button because I'm not sure just trading him solves everything. There's still a lack of depth in the team. You're still like with Mike Conley's decline, you're really, really needing Rob Dillingham to figure things out and come along. I feel like that Cat trade, it made some sense on the surface. The Dillingham trade on draft night made some sense as a big swing, but there's a lot of big ifs for this team that just made the Western Conference Finals. And I don't think just a Randle trade is going to solve everything, but it would help. And it might move me into the sweating category. But I'm not so sure this team is actually a contender again this year. And that's sad to say because we were talking about Anthony Edwards as Michael Jordan less than a year ago.
Yeah. Well, not next to Julius Randle. He's not.
No.
But what move can they make? Rudy Gobert has a trade restriction for the season, so they can't move off of him. And if you trade Rudy Gobert, I know it's not like out of the question if he didn't have that restriction, if they would move off of Rudy Gobert. But
you
if
can't trade him. Your defense falls apart. You can't do it.
That's the thing. You're kind of cornered between a rock and a hard place because Rudy Gobert makes so much sense for your team because you can't have Naz Reid at the 5 and still be a title contender without like elite defensive players at every other position. So you're kind of stuck with this formation of the team with Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert, kind of the same way that Donovan Mitchell in Utah was stuck. And the question becomes, if you move off of Rudy Gobert, you better be damn sure about the player that's coming in. Because Anthony Edwards, he likes to talk, right? He loved his time with Team USA. And I don't know how much longer he will be able to resist any sort of like making some real noise, some Jimmy Butler noise, if things don't turn around. Because right now it is panic time and they got to figure out a way to get that dude, Julius Randle, who's sitting on the bench, can't wait to leave the arena. And John Krasinski mentioning in his game story that he left well before all the reporters got in there, that he was leaving right after the game, just left. So they've got a problem on their hands there.
One more name for you, just off the top of my head. Did not think about this trade ahead of time. How about John Collins from the Utah Jazz as a name to try to swap for Julius Randle?
Go Deeks. I got my Muggsy Bogues jersey behind me. John Collins is having a career year, very efficient. He's a dunker. He's a guy who can shoot the 3. I like that move for them. And the question becomes, that makes them more exciting. Makes them, I think Utah would like to figure out a way to get, Colin Sexton, John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, some sort of value back for those guys as Cooper Flagg comes down the pipe. So I do think that makes a lot of sense for the Minnesota Timberwolves is get a guy who's a little bit more dynamic and doesn't demand, a high volume of ISOs like Julius Randle.
And for what it's worth, Colin Sexton, I think a pretty good chance that he's a guy that gets moved.